Have you ever had a desire on your heart or a knowing in your mind? Something that you couldn't quite shake. It's not just a desire. It's something that keeps quietly coming back to you year after year, something that you know ultimately you're meant for. And sometimes it's not loud or urgent because it can be in the future. It can be part of your fullest expression, but it's steady and it's persistent and it's something that says this matters. Don't forget about me. This is part of what I'm meant to do, whether it's personally or professionally. And that was this book for me. For years, from the time that before I even had a business, I knew that I was going to write a book, and I knew that I was going to write multiple books. And the further I got into my business over the last 12 years, it's just become clearer and clearer. I've had visions of signing books and of having multiple books and covers. And there's been so many different ways that this whisper has just been a steady knowing. And before this book, I wasn't really a writer, but I knew that I was going to be an author. So today I'm filling you in and sharing the other side of the book, the process, how it changed me and grew me, what I learned in this process. And this is for those of you who either want to write a book or are just really interested in, how all this came to be, creativity, how projects emerge. Maybe you're just interested in my journey, or you've ordered the book and you're just, curious for that backstory. This is what today's episode is about. So sharing all about how it came to be and how it landed in the world. And honestly, it still feels surreal. It truly feels surreal and exciting and right and perfectly imperfect. So today's episode is a little different. I'm not in teaching mode. This isn't a framework breakdown where we're going to break down the 5 steps of something. This is a behind the scenes sharing, a conversation. I'm really excited to share why I wrote this book, how I wrote it, the process, what it actually looked like, and as I said, how it changed me as I was writing it. So if you would like to order your copy, of course, the link is below. Thank you so much to all of you that have been ordering and sending me pictures and messages. It's been so exciting. If you want to order The Delicate Art of Transformation, it is available worldwide. You can click the link below and be directed to your Amazon and your copy. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. And for those of you that do order, please, pretty please write a review. It makes a giant difference. Every single review makes a difference on my author page and for the algorithm of the book. It truly does. So I thank you so much for doing that. So with that, let's just dive into this episode. Hey, I'm Talia Joy. If anybody's new, I didn't introduce myself, but hey, I'm so grateful you're here. And yes, let's dive into today's episode. So take a sip of water, take a deep breath, drop your shoulders, and let's do it. So since The Delicate Art of Transformation has been out officially in the world about a week at the time of recording this, it is already ranking in the top 200 in a couple categories on Amazon. Now, one of the categories, it went to number 24 out of the top 200. And it was like self-help, new age, something. And I am just so thankful. This is absolutely wild to me. So thank you for the support. I may say that a million times in the episode, but I truly mean it, and it truly means more than you know. Okay, so the real reason that this book came through was because of something I noticed. First of all, we're going to rewind it back years ago, and we're going to rewind it back even farther. But after working with people for a few years as a coach, and after my own self-growth. And so before I even started working with clients, of course, I have been immersed in self-growth myself since I was a kid. I found self-growth and even went to counseling and would read psychology books in high school. I was into even the psychology around true crime, but also things like the law of attraction and Dr. Wayne Dyer. His books found me when I was 14. So I've really been reading about psychology and also spirituality and self-growth for a very long time. But it wasn't until I started working with people and it started becoming really important to me that I created a framework that worked. So as I learned more about the process of transformation and self-growth, I even saw Tony Robbins live. I took, extensive immersive self-development programs, worked with different coaches. did a life coach certification program. So from a lot of different angles, I was starting to work on, like, how do we actually move someone from here to there? Of course, that's very important when I work with people, that they get results. So this is now about 10 years ago at the time of recording. And I started mapping out what seemed like the process of self-growth and what were the most important things and all of that. So over the last decade, of course, this process has refined more and more as my business has, as I personally have rapidly, or not even rapidly, more like the amount I've grown in the last 10 years is huge. So as I grow, as I learn tools, as I take courses, of course, all of that makes my work better and better. So this is not what it's about. Let's come back to the book. As I was studying basically the process of self-growth and transformation, I started to see somewhat of a, structure to it, or a framework to it. Me being a reflector, I like to step back and go, okay, what is the overall framework, and reflect on what I'm seeing here. So simultaneously, my business started focusing more on manifestation. So of course, as I said, I've been reading this stuff for a long time. And like everybody, I'm listening to things and I'm reading books and I'm trying to figure out the process of manifestation. And so all of this is happening, over years. And one day, now it would probably be like 7 years ago, I was sitting at the beach and I was getting ready to create a next program that felt really big. I felt the energy of it coming in. I had, a huge online community, and I've got group programs going, and I felt this big program coming. For those of you that have been around the block, that would become activated, which a lot of you took and know the power of. But it was before that was even created. And I was sitting there and I was watching, the waves, and I felt this download come through, and my fingers started writing, or I had a pen and a journal. I was at the beach, and I can still find that. I know the journal it was, and I could find that page because I know what it looked like. And it was basically saying desire, and then everything. It was like this whole framework. It was like you have a desire, and then everything that is like not aligned with that needs to break down. So then everything needs to break down. And then I'm all excited, writing this. And then we need to instill like the things that we do want, or the positive aspects, or, the healed things, the things we desire. And then we will start to move through, and this whole thing. So I'm not explaining it fully because it will become the book. It's what you read. It's what I'm talking about now, the pattern. But it all came out and it was so clear. It was like, we want something. We have to break down / shift the things that are in direct contrast to that, whether that takes you on a healing journey or it's changing habits. Like it has to, because 1 + 1 = 2. It was just so energetically obvious. And then with new, what I now call inspired actions or aligned actions, we can build up and become energetically what it is that we want. Once we are becoming in that new skin, so to say, which comes back to the book hugely, the laws of the universe are already working. So from there, we start attracting more of what we are. So again, I go into this all in my work, but downloading this process, I actually have it written in blocks because it was so obvious. It was like, this happens and this happens and this happens. And then we become that. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve. Holy crap. So that then became the program Activated. And Activated was a very much a group program that took you through like how you actually do it. You start with what you want. We go into reprogramming the conscious and the subconscious mind. We look at, reparenting the inner child who is in contrast to what we want, inspired actions, all these things. It was this process. And for those of you that went through it, it was incredibly powerful. So around the time that I was writing the course, I realized that not only was this the process of growth, the process of transformation, but it was the process of manifestation as well. And over the next sort of year or two, I did a few rounds of Activated. I started realizing like this is rippled in the seasons. This is rippled into the process of the butterfly. It's kind of the same process. So then from there, and again, this is over like a couple years, I started researching and geeking out like scientifically on the process of the butterfly. And all of a sudden, all these things were clicking, and it was like, holy crap, it's the same pattern. This is growth and evolution. And the only difference with things like manifestation is the slant of noticing synchronicities and, allowing life to support you in the universe, and that has a spiritual aspect to it. But truly, all of the processes mirror the same thing. And as a reflector, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like the code. If you are wanting to grow, ascend as a soul, manifest, this is the process we go through. And I'm seeing it in, Joe Dispenza's work, and I'm seeing it in Tony Robbins' work, and I'm seeing it in all these other people. It's just what works. It's not even that I made it up. It's that is the process. So over those deep realizations, and I hope I didn't go on too long on that, I didn't mean to spend so much time on that, it became very obvious that this has to become the book. This has to become what people move through, so they start to understand in a way that it's not even just me teaching it. It's 11:11 as I'm recording. This is written in the stars. This is written in nature. This is how we allow ourselves to evolve and not get stuck in looping patterns. We allow ourselves to become the version of us that is in joy and abundance and peace and these things that we desire. So it became very obvious that manifestation isn't separate from transformation, and that transformation is a process. Every desire we have asks us to evolve into someone new. Every new level requires a new shedding and evolving new habits. Every breakthrough follows right after a breakdown. And spending my life in self-growth and then helping people helped me to grow on hyperspeed and see these patterns, because I've had so many clients and I'm seeing these similarities, how we all go through this experience. So once the butterfly entered the chat, that was when I was like, oh my gosh, this is not just a metaphor that we casually throw around. It's a literal biological process that mirrors our own evolution perfectly. So then, as I said, I started studying that and brought so much of that into the book, where the butterfly is actually a main character. Behind the scenes, it's a main character that you go through the transformation as you follow my story and the teachings and all that. But it's really, really exciting. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The butterfly goes through, the initiation of being nudged, and it goes into the chrysalis, and then there's a breakdown, and then there's that goo phase, right? Then there's the reorganization and the shift, and eventually the rebirth. And it's not just symbolic, it's almost instructional. It's like allowing yourself to go through the process. And this is the same process of emotional healing, identity shifting, manifestation, growth, nature, the seasons. Again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So then the book writing became urgent. So into the more tangible parts of the book writing process. I actually started January 1st, 2022, and it wasn't even intentional January 1st. It just aligned that way. And I literally started writing on that day, on the 1st. And that's just how it landed. Pretty amazing. But by the end of March, I had written 88,000 words. So a lot of it was writing, and it would just free flow. Sometimes, because I speak so often, it was actually easier for me to channel. So I would dictate, like I would speak and then have it translated into words, and then of course edit it for a book. But over 3 months, basically, I had written 88,000 words, and it was like, it was all there. This beautiful process. I was so excited. So then synchronistically, I found my book writing mentor, Melanie Salter. I'll put her information below if you are looking for a book writing coach mentor. She does programs. I am not sure if she's doing one-on-one at this point, but she probably is, or she may be. You can reach out to her. She was the perfect match, and I'll totally get her if she'll have me back to help me with my next book, because she was an incredible book writing mentor. And again, I'll link her stuff in the show notes below. She had already known my work. She was in my community, and because she knew my voice, and she already had listened to, a zillion podcast episodes and had been in programs before we had connected, because she already knew my work and my voice, it made a huge difference. And not only is she gifted, but it really made me feel like, okay, let's do this. It was synchronistic. It was perfect. So draft by draft, we refined. And I remember when I went to her, I was like, okay, I've got 88,000 words. Like, there's not even much fluff. Like, it's so potent. Okay. There was a lot of fluff. So I realized The first draft was really about like cutting out repetition, removing entire sections. Like you already said this, you already used this story. Times when I'm like, oh my gosh, I told the same story twice. And it's like, no, we got to cut one of those out. Clarified ideas, less fluff. I thought there was no fluff. There was so much fluff that over the next few drafts, we cut it down to 74,000 words from 88. There was just things that didn't need to be there. When you start fine tooth combing it, right? It was just, okay, this is, as I said, redundant, repetitive, whatever. So as we went through each draft, my book writing mentor Mel would bring a different focus. So one of the drafts that we went through was, of course, simplifying, and then there was like grammar and all that. But one of them was about making the stories more vivid. So I'd go to all the places where I'm storytelling, and I'd really dive in and maybe make it longer or more potent, and just really bring people into those stories. One of the drafts was about the emotional highs and lows. So there's parts that are deeper where I'm sharing something and you're feeling more emotion. And then there's the highs of where it's really exciting, or there's humor that just makes you laugh out loud or something like that. So really going through and, really feeling into these highs and lows and making them really good. Other ones were about, at one time I took out a complete chapter that I was like, this doesn't even feel right for this book. It feels like it's something else. Times where I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to have a whole chapter on this because, adding this in, that'll really bridge the gap here. So there was a few drafts where it was a lot changing. Each draft became better and better. And then after maybe draft 4 or something, I don't remember exactly, but I said to Mel, I was like, okay, we're done adding things, taking things out. Now I just want to refine. And so how the editing process worked with her, and I don't even know if now she edits, she's more a mentor and a coach for the whole process. But what I really enjoyed is when she would edit, it basically showed up in my Word document like suggestions. So she didn't change anything. She would suggest, even if it was a spelling mistake, it would be a suggestion that I either have to accept or decline. Or she would say, a note like, does this feel repetitive? Or this is great, I love this, or let's make this better. And so as I would go through, I just had her guidance the whole time, but every single word was from me. And I really appreciated that as a creative. I don't want someone coming in and writing the words for me. I want it to come through my channel, through my soul, through my work. And so she really helped me to make it so Talia, but allowing me to ultimately say, yep, nope. Times when she would suggest something, I'm like, no, that doesn't really fit. Other times I'm like, ooh, I like what you're saying here. Okay, I'm going to redraft that and see how it goes, So it was really, really helpful. So draft by draft, it just got better and better and better. Another thing that I really liked is there was a lot of questions I had for her saying, what's the right way to do this? What's the right way to do that? And there were a lot of things where she said, that's up to you as the author, how you want to do it, how you want to space, paragraphs or the font size or whatever. Of course, it's up to me. So I had to really think, what is the book that I really want to create? And in the end, it ended up being 40 chapters, which 4 is my number, which it ended up being perfect. And they're small chapters. They're short. You can really, get through them easily. I also break paragraphs up where there's a lot of smaller paragraphs and there's space between them, which is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But for me, it makes it easier to read. It's just how I wanted to translate the book. So things like that were really fun to decide as we were going through, like, yeah, what font even do I want to use? What the spacing, the size, all of that was really cool because I could bounce ideas off of her, but ultimately I'd make those calls, and that was, how I saw it. And the book isn't going to be perfect. This is my first book, but it is something that I'm really proud of and we put a lot of work into. So some of the things I wanted to say, one thing, if anyone's considering writing a book or you have already, one thing that I found really challenging is that it's such a big project. So at any one time, there are points of the book where like, oh, I haven't gone over the ending in a month or two because I've been focusing on this part, or getting through it beginning to end. Like that's not just an afternoon, it's a book. So it's like any one of us reading a book. You can't get through that in like a weekend unless it's, you're constantly reading. And so it was challenging at times when I go like, okay, have I even done that part? Oh yeah, let's go back to that. Okay, yeah. And even toward the end, I'm like, I finalized like this part, right? And I kind of go back, oh yeah, right. So that was challenging, but I gave myself space. I took breaks when I needed to. I gave myself time. I took myself away to more Airbnbs than I can count to just work on it for like 3 days straight, do yoga, go on walking trails, eat yummy food, and just write. I would, be holed up in my cabin or whatever, going on walks and, like I said, doing some yoga, but really just writing. And it was incredible. So a few things that I really learned that were really neat is the biggest thing that I think of is I learned, I started finding, I should say, my author voice. And I learned that writing a book is very different from writing a podcast episode, writing a course, writing an Instagram post. So one thing that I believe I'm really good at is I'm really good at curating an experience, whether it's here on the podcast with every episode, I map it all out, or it's in my programs or the retreat. There's always in what I do a beginning and a middle and an end. So in that way, like as you saw, as I said, I wrote it all in 3 months. The writing part, getting it all out for me wasn't difficult, but even at the beginning, my mentor's like, okay, so this is a book, not a course, and she wasn't saying it critically. It was so helpful. And I'm like, yeah, right. It's a very different tone writing a book. It's a narrative. It's being a storyteller. So a book required a different kind of creativity and even of intimacy that I didn't expect. So it meant being a little bit more vulnerable in a slightly different way. There was an honesty that, like, if I'm choosing to put this in a book, it's more raw. I can't really describe it, but that part was like a bit more vulnerable than even what I'm used to. But just telling stories is different than teaching. It's not a teaching thing. This is an experience. It's a book. It's a narration. So another wild part in that, or in the experience, is that as I was writing, I've been sharing a little bit about this on Instagram recently, but as I was writing, I was actively going through it. So writing the book and telling stories had me fine-tooth comb my life and my journey. And in the book, I tell the story of my journey with my body, my eating disorder, my own healing journey. It mirrors the butterfly, and we go through these two journeys while, learning and teaching or whatever at the same time. So going through my own personal journey with healing and self-love and my body with a fine-tooth comb, there were so many things, dots that I connected or realizations that I had. And so I'd be writing about transformation, actively going through it. I would be, there'd be moments I'm typing about something and I go out and I'm in, the world to go get food or whatever happens, and I'm instantly put into what I was just talking about. Something, I'd have a realization, I'd have an emotional release as I'm writing, going like, oh my gosh, like it's like I'm typing it as I'm realizing it. There were some deep moments like that were really impactful, because I know that that's what it's going to do to you, where you can't read it and not grow. So writing it, I grew exponentially, because this book wasn't just I healed and now I'm reflecting on it. There was a lot of that too, but it was facilitating the healing as I was writing it. So it was really, really powerful. So this book definitely did change me. It softened me. It clarified me. It took me through the process. It showed me how much growth happens while we create, not just after we create. And writing the book was its own transformation. And then how I've talked about in 2025, I went through an entire rebirth in that year, as I've mentioned before. And even because I had just gone through the process of writing the book and I was still editing and all that, I could even flip through the book going, what did I say about, inner child healing, or it was like I had language and a framework to deal with what I went through in 2025. And I had the reflection to go, holy crap, I did go through the process, and like all in 1 year, which doesn't typically happen. It was so trippy. But realizing that it gave me more tools. It gave me more of a framework, more of an understanding of the process, so that I wasn't, even when I was in my lows, I'm like, I know this is important. I know I'm in the goo. I know I'm going through the rebirth. I know I'm going through the shift, whatever it was. So it was so powerful. And now that the book is out, not only are all you guys buying it and I'm seeing it on charts, which is so exciting, I'm also doing interviews. I'm part of collaborations coming up, and I'm working on getting it it into bookstores. So here in Canada, once you actually own the ISBN, it's not just through Amazon or KDP, then bookstores can order it wholesale and that kind of thing. So I've been talking to bookstores on my island, on Vancouver Island, and a lot of them have agreed for me to come in, bring copies of my books, and they're going to sell them. So we're in the process of that. And from there, then bookstores internationally can order it and all that good stuff. And I'm just really excited to have this out in the world because it makes growth really approachable. I truly feel that whether you're a man or a woman or somebody who is going through a transformation, somebody who's on the other side, maybe you're just starting, this book will meet you where you're at because that's what life does. That's what the seasons do. That's what growth does. If you go into a counselor, they're going to meet you where you're at and move you forward. This book, you'll see yourself in. It'll give you the tools to reach forward. You'll see yourself in all the phases and you'll have a greater understanding of your own journey. And so in that, it does help you manifest. It does help you emotionally heal. It does help you move forward and shift identity and step into that version of yourself that you were always meant to be. Because the caterpillar was always meant to be the butterfly. So I hope I covered everything. This book, I'm just so proud of it. It is good for anyone, no matter where you are in your growth. It's incredibly grounded while being expansive. It's kind of like what I do on this podcast. I strive to always be expansive because that's who I am. I'm deep and expansive, but if we don't bring it down to the ground, if we don't make it understandable, then it's just fluff, right? It's just be the change without any actual tools is not useful either. So I know this book is going to meet in the middle. It's going to be an incredibly grounded guide while also expanding you. So thank you so much again for listening to this. And I highly recommend sharing the book if you do resonate with it, because the more people we have living in their light, the better we all collectively are. We need more people in their light, in their higher consciousness, living the life that they're meant to live, being in their butterfly self. That's truly how we change the world, right? It's about looking in the mirror and doing our own work and trusting in our own growth. So the more work you do on yourself, or the more you evolve in your path and on your path toward becoming more peaceful and more radiant and more expressed and more purpose-filled and all of that, the work that you do ripples out into your community. It ripples out with your friends and your family. And if you have children or people around you, it makes a difference. And so we need more people in their growth, in their evolution. So this book is incredibly, as I said, approachable, but also very expansive. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope I covered it all. I had lots of questions about the book writing process and a lot of people curious to hear more. So I hope that this resonated with you. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.